and welcome to Berkshire Guitar Amplifier Repairs. Stuart Smith here in Reading, England. I'd like to say up on the bench today, but I'm not going to say it because it's a Fender Bassman 10. I can barely even get the thing off the deck. 1970s, mid-1970s amp. Huge, great big hulking beast of a thing. Let's just go and have a look at it. Here we are looking along the front. Very typical Fender silver face sort of thing. 2 instrument inputs and 4 10-inch speakers. And along the back here, the voltage selector. Ugh, hate that sort of thing. Off on standby, external speaker. No reverb, of course, on the bass. A couple of 6L6s, I think, from memory. I'll have to have a look. Interesting yellow plug. Oh, and there's the crib sheet there. Yes, 2 6L6s, 3 ECC83s. Oh no, 2 ECC83s and a ECC81. That's 1287 there. For the phase splitter. This is what's called road worn. You can see it's in a really terrible state. All the Tolex has been ripped off in quite a few places, but the customer doesn't want anything done with that. He wants it left. Same down the front here, look. All looking a little bit sad. And over there. There we go. Well, what we're going to do is to take the chassis out of here, get it up on the bench. I just want to give it a good look over to see what sort of state it's in. I'm sure you know, but to get the chassis out we take these 4 screws out here and these 4, and the chassis will come out. Here we are, chassis out and up on the bench, and it's quite clean inside actually. It's very not dirty at all. No cobwebs and spiders and all the usual junk. So let's just have a little look around here and see what we can see. First of all, it all looks completely original to me. It's got all these blue caps in, original electrolytics, and they will definitely all need changing, those 3. And the resistors don't look too bad. They're all carbon, but they're not the really ancient carbon ones. They are somewhat more modern, but we'll measure some values, particularly these 100k ones that sit in the anodes of the preamp valves. So what this tells me is that when we take the doghouse lid off on the other side, we will find the original electrolytic capacitors, and all those will need changing too. Grid resistors look quite screen resistors look quite nice, good quality, and they look fine. A little bit of sort of evidence of something happening on this transformer here. Might have got a bit hot at one point and leaked a bit of something. These 4 diodes in the bridge rectifier, these are old diodes here. I think I'm really tempted to replace those with a nice set of new 1N4007s. And this is the diode which is doing the rectification for the bias. The bias comes off this point here, so again we'll change that diode. Right, so let's turn it over now and see what it's like on the top side. Just before we do that, it's interesting to note this huge empty space here, isn't it, on all these typical Fenders, the silver face, black face and whatever. This is crammed with circuitry like the tremolo and the reverb and all that kind of stuff, so you don't need it on a bass amp, so this just sits here empty. On the top side, a couple of Siemens 6L6s. I've never seen those before. Amazing, doesn't matter how many amps I see, there's usually something new. So these have got Siemens written on the side here. I'd like to test those, and in particular I want to know what's going on with this valve here. Something's burnt onto it there, look, so it's got all gunk all over it. Probably okay, but something's been touching it. The preamp valves are a JJ, so I expect that's been changed recently, and we have two Fenders. So they are probably the original valves, these two, and someone's changed the face splitter valve at some point. And I don't know about the Siemens 6L6s, maybe they were original. Output transformer, quite a hefty thing, and mains transformer. A lot of ironmongery on this. And here's the doghouse. We're going to take the lid off there. Underneath there we will find the HT smoothing capacitors. I'm betting on them being original. Well, let's have a look. Here we are, the big reveal. But before that, a note from our sponsor. No, let's just reveal it. There we go. Aha! Okay, original HT caps, Mallory's. Very good capacitors. They're probably okay. Let's have a look, see if we can see anything toward. Doesn't look too bad that side. Let's have a look at the other side. Again, they look okay. I need to ask the client what he wants to do budget wise, because he's selling this amplifier, and although we want it in good condition for the buyer, we don't want any faults on it. Things like replacing all these capacitors is very expensive, and if the amp is basically working and the capacitors are basically still okay, he might save himself the expense of that. The next thing I want to do, do you know what, I think I want to turn it on and just make sure it's working. It's always useful to know what state the amp is in before you start pulling it to pieces. So let's get it powered up and see if we've got a signal even. Okay, the amp is on and now to standby. And I'll just reach behind me and strum the guitar. Okay, there's a quietish signal there. I have no idea what the volumes are doing. It's quite scratchy, the master volume. Sounds absolutely great. I know it's just an open string strum, but I can tell. But there's not much wrong with this amp. That sounds quite good actually. Obviously we'll be giving it a proper run up and a test and seeing if it can develop full power and all that stuff, but for the moment it's promising. It also is fairly quiet, it's not making a hideous load of noise. Obviously we've got a bit of a scratchy control there, which will do. Okay, this is looking promising in terms of not requiring a large amount of money spending on it. The next thing I want to do is to test the valves. I want to make sure, are these a matched pair and are the preamp valves good? To do that I'll put the preamp valves on my orange tester and I'll put these on my homebrew tester and just see if we have matched currents there. So let's make that our next job. And here's the first preamp valve. It's come up good and it's got the number 8, which means both halves of that valve are the same gain, so that's doubly good. Nothing wrong with that. We don't need to put a new one in. Okay, let's try the second preamp valve. And we'll let that test run and I'll rejoin you when that one comes to the end of its test. Here we are coming to the end, and again that's come up good, and again 8. So we have another very good preamp valve there. it's in good condition and both sides of it are equally matched. I'm going to clean up the bases of these, the pins on these valves. They are not very clean, and also I happen to notice on this one I took out before, you can see the pins look bent off to the left here. So I want to straighten all those. I'm also going to clean the sockets there, and I'll show you how I do that. There are lots of ways of doing it, and I've got my way. Meanwhile though, just to finish off, we will now check the phase splitter, and remember this is an ECC81, there it is there, look, 12AT7, so we need to select a different thing on our valve tester, and to do that we go like that, and we go ECC81, look. Now we start the test, and off it runs, and let's rejoin when we see what the result of that test is. Coming up to the end of this test, and let's see what happens. Again, we've got a good look, and in this case we've got a 6 and an 8, which means that one half of the phase splitter is not the same gain as the second half. I would quite like to replace that valve, just because I like both halves of the phase splitter to be the same. You know, it's not a big deal, but they are somewhat unmatched. The reason for that is, by the way, one half of the phase splitter drives one of the power valves, and the other half of the phase splitter drives the other power valve. And if the gain is slightly different, one valve is being driven a bit harder than the other, and that can produce a little bit of distortion on the sine wave. And we don't want distortion on guitar amps, do we? I've said it many times before. Okay, I've popped in a brand new JJ ECC81, and it will be interesting to see if it comes up good with an equally matched two halves. It's not a specially selected phase splitter valve, this of course, so there's no reason for it to have identical two halves, but let's see if this is any better than the one that came out. Here we are coming up to the end of the test, and we're going to get a good, I'm almost sure of it, yes, and this is a bit more closely matched, look. That's a 7, and I think the flashing is like a 7.5 or something, so if there were two solid lights, I think that's how this works, I can't remember, but anyway, this is much more closely matched. I think I'm just going to try a tongue sol ECC81 and see if we can get a perfect match. I thought I had another make of valve, but I didn't, so I pulled out another JJ, and look, we've got a good match now. We've got 2/8 and good there, and so that's good for the phase splitter position. Let's now test the power valves. I put these two 6L6s on the tester, and they are both matched to within 2 milliamps of each other. So that's good enough, and we obviously have this kind of burning issue here. Something's touched this, like a plastic bag or something. I don't think it's anything particularly to worry about. I might just see if it'll scrape off, but I won't go to too much trouble there. Again, how much do we want to spend on the amplifier? There's no point in putting a brand new set of valves in if these are good enough. The next thing I want to do is to clean these sockets and to improve the situation on the pins of these valves. So let's do that next. Right, these pins are quite badly bent here, so all I'm going to do is to take a pair of pliers and just gently straighten them all up like this. All that's happened here is the valve's been put in carelessly at some point. I don't think it's the easiest thing in the world to put a valve in and out of an amplifier. I don't think it's just like obvious how much force to use and how much wriggling to do to get the thing to come out. Right, that's a lot better. Now I'm just going to get a piece of fine emery cloth, clean these up a little bit. And all I do here, bit of emery cloth, look, and just have a little go at each pin from the inside first, then the outside. Doesn't need much, just remove the tarnishing. Go around the outside like that when you've done. And they're already a lot better. I'll just finish that one off. Now I'm going to show you my way of cleaning valve sockets. There are lots of ways, so everyone has their preferred method. This is mine, which works okay. I put a little bit of deoxit into a pot like that, and I use a cocktail stick, wooden cocktail stick, and I just dab it in there, and I go in one pin at a time and just twizzle it around. The roughness of the wood is exactly the right degree of roughness to clean away contaminants without damaging the actual pins, sockets themselves. Anything metal based I think is too rough for these, let's face it, very cheap pressed socket pins here. So this will do very nicely. And we're hardly using any deoxit here, just enough to get inside there. It's got a very low evaporation rate, deoxit D5, so you don't need to worry about that. That'll still be there in a couple of days if I left that. And yeah, you know, there's not much on there. A little bit dirty, look. Let's turn it around and use the other side. Do these ones. These will never have been done in the 40 years it was since this amp was made. There you go, that's my method. Doubtless you have your methods, but that's mine. Now we can put these valves back in. All nice and clean. The sockets are nice and clean, and that fits in nice and tightly too, which shows those pins are correctly tensioned. And we'll put the new, oh yes, I need to do the socket on the phase splitter. I'll do that now, and then put the phase splitter valve back in. Okay, I'm going to try and use a scalpel to get some of this crap off this valve. Let's see, oh, that's working very well actually. Good. So I'm just going to carry on with that there. I won't continue to do it over here because it's all dropping onto the amp. So I think this will clean up quite nicely. There you go, look at that. That came out beautifully. So we've got all that brown gunk off there, that's good. So we can pop these back in. There we go. Good. Now I think it's time for a word with the client to see what he wants to do in terms of anything else that we feel like we might want to do to the amp. I suppose the other thing I really ought to do is to test each of the speakers. I've had a word with the client and he doesn't want to do a recap on this. I think that's a good decision. Quite expensive to do that, and those capacitors are fine. They'll need doing at some point, but they'll live to fight another day. So we can put the doghouse kennel back on, and the only thing I want to do with this amp now is to get it up on load and make sure it's producing, I don't know, 40 or 50 watts or something like that, and there's nothing nasty happening on the sine wave. So let's get cracking with that. Okay, here we are, scope set on times 10, so this is 20 volts per division, and as I wind up the input signal you can see we get, before squaring, I'll just back it up a touch, so we're getting 20, 40 and 10, so we're getting 50 volts peak to peak. I'll just turn that down. Now let's do the sums. Okay, so we've got, you've seen me do this before. but we've got a 50 volt peak to peak sine wave into 8 ohms. So the peak, which is this, is 25 volts. We multiply that by times 0.707. For details, see the internet. And that's 17.7 volts. So 17.7 volts is the DC equivalent voltage of a 50 volt peak to peak sine wave. I always find that quite surprising how low that is compared to the 50 volts, and I expect you do too. So, and that's what we want. We want the DC equivalent, and then we can just apply Ohm's law and power law to find out if I put 17.7 volts DC across a 8 ohm resistor, what is the power dissipated? Well, that's given by V squared over R. So 17.7 times 17.7 is that divided by R, 8 ohms, and we've got 40 watts, which is, you know, pretty much exactly what I would expect from this amplifier. So it's producing full power, no problems there whatsoever. 40 watts, job done. So we'll put it all back together and call this one a wrap. One thing I'll do before we put the chassis back in is to just check the mains plug here, and when I take the top off, indeed there are a problem or two here. We've got a 13 amp fuse in, which you shouldn't have. Only use 13 amp fuses for high power appliances, electric fires, kettles, irons, that sort of thing. A 5 amp will be perfectly right in here. The anchoring is okay, and I just checked that these are tight, which they are. Yep, all tight, so that's good. So I'll just pop a 5 amp fuse in there, and that will be fine. Okie doke, well there we go, another one under the belt. Not too much work involved in that one. A new valve, a service, a check over, check the full power, and make sure there's nothing nasty inside like leaking capacitors. And also did the mains fuse, and I also put the back on a bit more sensibly compared to how it was. And there was a broken knob, so I put a new knob on, so just bits and pieces really. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the look around that classic amp. Absolutely beautiful amps, these old Fenders of course, but they weigh an absolute ton. The 4x4 cabinet underneath this thing makes this just virtually, well, I can't lift it off the deck at all, and it would need 2 people to move, which is probably why it's so kind of road battered, just in and out of trucks, up and down stairs, in and out of gigs. Huge, great big heavy thing. Anyway, I hope the next person to buy it enjoys it, and it goes on for many more years yet. I'll see you on the next video, and as always, thanks for watching.